just a beautiful thought of nature and how nature enfolds us in this transpersonal exploration that we're going to have, and remembering that perhaps transpersonal is all about relationships. So today we're asked to think about what are the major changes and revisions that have happened in the guidelines. How might we think about integrating these into our practices, and what are some of the resources? And as we ponder this, we think of that journey we spoke about yesterday, that journey of kind of moving from doing to being, moving from objective to subjective, not dropping one, but just kind of moving more deeply, and growing in that space from learning about to understanding to perceiving to experiencing. So just kind of taking that all in. And our community really is one, and as the guidelines have articulated, these are, so the other part of my life is as an ANCC, person. And so we have tried to provide in the guidelines, for those of you that seek to get continuing education, the purpose and the outcomes written in ways that ANCC reviewers would like to see these. And hopefully that will help you. And some of you are not necessarily so drawn to getting, and this is all on your guidelines, so you don't really have to write this down. But some of you are not maybe drawn to getting continuing nursing education or continuing education in unison. That's fine. But in some healthcare institutions, it is the way that things are funded. It's the way that nurses are able to get funding, or others actually are able to get funding to attend things. So for any of you who this might be helpful to, this is it. And certainly it helps us understand what we are hoping for the people who sit in the community with us, how they will benefit or grow from this. And so we are kind of stepping up into this beautiful mountain space and reaching toward the sky. So yesterday when we were in our groups, we spent a lot of time thinking about self-inquiry and some of those other components. But one of the strong themes that I heard from the reports from all the small groups was the importance of understanding what the words mean. And I know that as we worked on the transpersonal guidelines, it allowed me to go back to the books that I haven't maybe looked at for a while, and maybe I should look at a lot more often, but to kind of go back. And so as we welcome our community, it's really probably a wonderful thing to figure out with them what do they think transpersonal. For me, transpersonal is probably about relationships. And the relationship that I have with myself and the relationship that I have with the other, and how that has grown. And remember that as people are coming to transpersonal, they have they've been in a practice for a while. They've been in, and hopefully they've been able to be in a support group, maybe not, but it would really be nice. I think that's another thing that came up, and certainly in my group, was this short period of time we have to sit with each other, and so how valuable it is to have some kind of a mentorship or support group going on. So Dee would tell us that transpersonal really is this state of being that goes way beyond, kind of this personality, and we really have this sense of the whole. So if we went around this room, every one of you would have every one of you could share a transpersonal relationship that you've had, every one of you. And so as we invite our community members to talk about that, we might share something in our own experiences that really has spoken to us about the transpersonal nature. And these are just some of the things that Dee and Dora have taught us. And so I just offer these to you. I'm speaking to the choir, so all of you know all these things. But for me, when I went back and really looked at the book and looked at the things that I've learned, I don't know, I think it just reminded me of the importance of always going back and looking so we understand and then can move into the meaning. So we think about transpersonal being really grounded in experience and not necessarily seeing things unfold in some kind of way that seems logical. It's kind of like when you learn a process and it looks like it's like this linear thing, and then all of a sudden you have that knowing that there really is no such thing as that linear thing. And the power of compassion, that I always remember that, and I'm sure that all of you do too, that really is what we have always been we know that's what gets us up in the morning. That's what fills up our heart and allows us and calls us to do this work. The way that we bring ourselves to stillness, and many of us are connected deeply to our breath in order to do that. And as we are able to move to stillness, to become very intentional. And certainly within the transpersonal, we spend, this transpersonal course, we spend time really pondering that whole idea of sustained centering and this act of being deeply within ourselves. We know that as we are able to do that, that we are able to connect more directly with the person's, not only their vital field, but their psychodynamic field. And that perhaps is one of the steps that we're taking as we move from foundations to transpersonal. So we really are able to have these really deep, deep connections. And I think that perhaps for me, one of the most powerful lessons is that the way that I'm able to do this is if I'm willing to make the commitment to do my own work, and that is a gentle discipline, but it is definitely something. So there's this deep connection, this deep relationship. And so it's a beautiful kind of unfolding, the falls. And Dee spoke with us recently at one of the dialogues about this transformation. And so as our commitment to this ongoing work happens, she spoke to us about this in kind of phases, and that's what these little numbers are. But the call to compassion, that as we're called, and all of you have had this experience, this call to help, to be of help, and then to begin to approach and to move ourselves into this, this space of quieting, this space of centering, and to be able to stay there. And so I heard Maria speaking yesterday in our group about how she really works with folks to understand when they are centered so that they know when they aren't centered, and how important that is. And recognizing that in this approach, in this way that we're working, we are focusing and really moving our awareness to the person. We're also connecting with our own self as kind of our own ally who's going to help us out here. And as we continue our journey, we begin to be able to assess the partner's fields and really make some decisions about how to best help that person. And I think the other thing that she points out to us is this whole idea of intentionality is really around our will and our willingness, and so engaging that and our desire to do this, and knowing at some level when we are done. When we're done with this treatment. So it's just this continuing journey that we are on with other. And this is a relationship that we have together, that we share together, and it's very, very powerful. And as the people have come to us to sit with us in the community of transpersonal, they probably have some extremely, I know that in the mentorship group that Jennifer and Marjorie and I and David have the opportunity to sit with, every month I am humbled beyond words at some of the experiences that people bring, and how we are offered the opportunity to just gently open the door of what might be, open a door to them so they can understand and perhaps articulate what might be happening. So we really, in the transpersonal course, are stepping deeper and deeper and deeper into this journey. And reflection really allows this to happen. And as the facilitators of a transpersonal course, you really are an interpreter. So you're helping people learn how to interpret the meaning of their experience. And so what I think what we have some resources, and we'll talk about those as we go along, but I think that I'm going to kind of go through the guidelines, and again, you have all these lined up, so these big, these big like headings are just what the critical element is. And so when we think about this inner process of therapeutic touch and in the context of transpersonal healing, we think about our role as our role of ourself as a practitioner. I think it actually goes maybe even beyond that, we begin to think about ourselves as a human, and then what is it that we have, this role that we have in healing, and what is self-development? So for me, self-development is this journey of being contemplative, being reflective, becoming aware, and then engaging in intentional practices that support my development. And so this is an area that certainly I know that in my role as a faculty person, certainly and others that I work with students. And so the contemplative practice is really ways for you to be still. However that might be for you. So for some of you, you may have a sitting practice, you may have a moving practice, you may have both, you may do art, whatever it is that stills the mind and stills us and allows us to drop down deeply and really then listen. And as I'm able to drop down deeply and be reflective, then I have, and again, remember that this is not with a judgment, the should, S-H-O-U-L-D. I'm not going to should myself to pieces, but I'm going to really be gentle, but I'm also going to be clear. You know, I'm not going to just like say, oh yeah, no problem. So I'm going to allow myself to really enter into this dialogue with myself and be reflective. And then the light bulbs come on. You know, there's like little light bulbs. I can decide whether I pay attention, just you know, but I might want to, and then engage in practices, remembering that just because practices seem to be really fabulous, they may not be fabulous. So what we are encouraging our learners in the transpersonal community to become more and more aware of is their own energy flow, their own pranic flow, not like, oh yeah, I think I'm going to just eat this apple because it's just the best thing in the whole world for me. But what does that apple make you feel like? You know, what does it make you feel like when you see something that is unsettling? So really paying attention to the impact that has and how that impacts your flow, and how you may meet that and perhaps soften it, or I don't know, maybe revise it. And so in my stillness time, I had this thought of how this all kind of goes together. And so I'm just offering, this is just kind of a rough cut, but it integrates for me this idea of self-development and so my relationship with myself and my relationship with another. So the call to compassion, so if I'm thinking about myself, how do I call myself to myself? Gently, compassionately, nicely, and how do I meet another? So I begin to be contemplative, I begin to center. I think about the way that I approach myself. Do I approach myself with a big should on my head? I should have done that, I shouldn't have done that, I'm a bad person. Sometimes we are pretty good at figuring out everything we should have done, but how can I drop some of that? And how do I approach the people that I'm working with, my healing partners? How do I approach my class, the community that I sit with? How can we all be in stillness together? And so then we move kind of into that outreach, and that really allows this space for reflective dialogue to happen with self, with other. And that really creates a space for us to begin to search. And again, it kind of continues that dialogue, but it really is a gentle searching, just as we are assessing and as we have become still and connected with our healing partner, we're kind of connected with ourselves. So it kind of this is kind of the both things happening. And we become aware. So for ourselves, we become aware of those things that may serve or not serve us. For our healing partner, we may become aware of what's happening. And that awareness may show itself up just in these knowings within us. We may have visualizations, or maybe all kinds of things that happen. But we have this knowing. And from that knowing, we can then make some plans. We can think about the rebalancing and practices that may help us with that. We always are, it's kind of a circular process. So I'm a nurse, and so when I went to nursing school, we had those 4-column deals, where we assessed and we planned and we implemented and we evaluated and we were done, right? And we've had some pretty fabulous things. Of course, they probably were irrelevant because they had really nothing to do with the person, but they were great. They were great. And so we see that this just kind of keeps on going. We're kind of always kind of checking it out. And as we sit, so when I went home last night, I really thought of a lot of you. My head, my heart were just like overflowing. And so I had to go home and jaunt for a while, because that's what I do to help it's one of my quieting practices. But then I was dreaming. I dreamt of I didn't necessarily dream that I would lose my PowerPoint, but I did dream about this, this day that we would have together. So a lot of stuff comes up in our dreams, this recall, this kind of stepping back, and then staying the course. And so maybe the lesson that I've learned from each of you, and certainly from Helen Erickson, is to stay the course, stay the course even when things get tough. So I just offer that to you. And the reason that I offer it to you in this transpersonal course is that I think it might be a fun opportunity or fun experience for people in your course to try and see what they think. So I just kind of offer that. And so this is the Rose of Hope. So this is a rose that David and I thought would be yellow, and it never bloomed for 20 years, and here it is pink. But, it's beautiful. We got it for our daughter. She loves yellow. So the next, but she loves pink too, and we love her. So the next assumption, or the next critical element then, in the guidelines is about the philosophical assumptions and the theoretical frameworks. So I think that Marianne said yesterday, we're not teaching a philosophy class, we're not teaching a theory class, but what is it that is relevant to you in your practice? And so at the transpersonal level, the curriculum committee really called out two of the assumptions, and so I would just offer these to you, and these again are in your packet. But what is on the top is that healing is this potential that can be actualized. So we've defined that, and we've really looked at the work of Dora and Dee to be able to define that. And the ones below are so you saw that really great table that Marianne put together for us that have the old assumptions and the new assumptions. So the bottom purple are just how these two weave together. And we've always known that. So with your transpersonal community, and I think we even talked about this, we certainly talked about it in our group, what do people think about healing? What does that mean? What does healing mean? What does it mean to us? And what is that? What are these ideas that we have that energy follows intention? How does your community that are coming back after 4 or 6 months of continuous practice, continuous self-development, what are they noticing? What are they noticing about this? And I think that how is it that we facilitate, so one of the things that we remember, and that they speak a lot about this in foundations, we're not doing the healing. We are just kind of the helper bees along here. I do my own healing, and I'm helped by all of you, actually, more than you'll ever know. And the other assumption within the transpersonal guidelines that we are really kind of focusing on is that it is transpersonal. So here it is. And again, this is drawn from Dee's work that she offers us. And if you haven't read Therapeutic Touches Transpersonal Healing, it's amazing to go back and read that again. So she reminds us again that it is this beyond just the personality, just beyond us, just this experience of beyond. And I think that when we looked back, and when Marianne looked back and helped us with this table, she reminds us that we really are capable of, and things that we just can hardly believe. So if we went around here, every one of you could think of somebody that you've interacted with, and you thought, how the heck are they, how are they doing this? How is this happening? I couldn't do it, but you know what? We're not being asked to do it. We're asked to be with somebody who is doing it. So those are the assumptions that we, and all 4 of them are in, but really in the transpersonal course, these are ones that we really invite our community to explore deeply. And then we think about theories, and again, theories is a word that's for some people brings delight, and for some people doesn't bring as much delight. And so how is it useful in this course that we're teaching? And so Martha Rogers, so I've had some experience over the last few years of exploring the human energy field, and certainly Martha's name is the name that comes up pretty often. And I actually think the more that I think about her, I've always really appreciated Martha Rogers. I think she was a woman before her time, way before her time. But within her theory, within the science of unitary human beings, the part that I think is really important in the transpersonal course is this whole idea of mutual process. This, this knowing that that we don't have fields, that we are fields, and that we are in constant interaction all the time. And what that might mean to us is that in our relationships, we are always communicating. We always are communicating, whether we are open in our mouths or not. We are always communicating. And certainly when we had the opportunity to reach out, many of you were people that participated in our survey. And when we reached out to people that really are not necessarily people that really are not necessarily even engaged in energy healing practices of any kind. People just spoke about this knowing that they had, that something was going on, that when they went into a room, they could feel what was going on. There was absolutely no doubt in their mind that there was this phenomenon of energy that was happening. And so for us at the transpersonal level, we remember that this process is always going on, it's changing, and it's happening in this really beautiful process of always unfolding. The other theory in the transpersonal space that we think about, and we'll talk more about this actually tomorrow, your theory, the theory that all of you have been working on for lots of years in Montana. So these are your words, these are not my words. And the two concepts that we think perhaps really kind of jump right out at us in the transpersonal course are patterning and engaging presence. And so I, in the dialogues, was blessed to be able to write for the patterning group, and many of you, so Cordy and Maria and Sharon and Rebecca and Diane and others that I may not be, Maria, were in this group. And I can actually remember being on a call with Cordy, and she was like looking stuff up in a dictionary. It was a phenomenal experience. And so we came, these are your words, these are not my words. But we recognize that patterning is this expression, it's this really this continued expression of our own unique personal, it's really our own unique personal field of relationship with the universal field. And within the reflective narratives that each of you in this process have turned into us, we recognize that these patterns of healing are revealed as changes in consciousness and relationship with our inner self. So these are your words, and there's a little bit longer of a discussion about patterning in some of the work that we do, but remembering that as we, all of you, not me certainly alone, have worked on this. We had pattern appraisal and patterning. Remember how we had those two things and how they came together into this one. Actually, Julie was on this too. I just see Julie, and she was in this group too. And how this came together, and recognizing that this patterning, and as our transpersonal community sits together, how is it then that we enter into this relationship with another with the intention of healing, and perhaps helping people discover their patterns and helping repattern or discover new patterns. So patterning is one of them. And the other one is engaging presence. So I just keep thinking of that beautiful little horse we looked at yesterday, and how she was just like looking out and so present. And certainly in the theory of healing, presence runs through the entire thing. And it really is this, excuse me, this compassionate, this intentional compassionate attunement to being connected, to being with the other. And it is really central in the relationship. I am there for you. I am there for you. That is what I'm saying to you when you sit in my chair. I am there for you. And we recognize that within this, the context of engaging presence, that we are within our centered state, and within this we are able to create this healing relationship. So again, transpersonal is about relationships, and we really are able to now acknowledge that this relationship is really with the higher self. And I think Maria spoke about that yesterday when we were talking about things in the morning. So there's other concepts, of course there are, but these are the ones that in the transpersonal we are looking at now, and certainly this afternoon as Denise goes into the inner processes, we'll build on these, on certainly these. But presence is something that runs through, and it's this compassionate and, this willingness to be with. And so I'm always amazed and I'm always intrigued by streams because they're they don't always look like this, but there's calmness on the top of it. But when I put my feet down into the water, I can usually feel something going on. And sometimes it's just really smooth and I can just feel like a little bit, and sometimes it's not so smooth. And so I think that we are helping people within the transpersonal community be more comfortable with uncertainty, be more comfortable with not knowing all the answers, because who does know all the answers? But being a little bit more comfortable, and many of us are not always as comfortable not knowing. And so if we just kind of put our feet down into the water, then we sometimes become a little bit more, and if we kind of tip over, it's okay, it's okay. And so then as we move into the next critical element, we think about the actual practice and understanding of the transpersonal nature. And so within that, again, there's a lot of, different phases or phases. But in this particular course, we are thinking about these parts of it. And so it's rebalancing, reassessment, and feedback. So again, it's in that circle, in that circular way of doing it. We really have reached out, we've searched, and we've made some decisions about how we might be able to support another on their healing journey, support another's field, do some work. So we've been able to do that, and the rebalancing then is that treatment. And Dee spoke in that video, which I wanted to say was excellent, and I couldn't play it in my computer, so I was really happy we got to see it, and it was wonderful. But she really spoke yesterday in that video about the three things, or the three ways that we might work with energy. I think these are probably expressions of what she said, but maybe expressed a little bit differently. But really being able to think at the transpersonal level about not just physical, but certainly mental kinds of that psychodynamic field. And really the sustained centering, and probably that is one of the keys. And people do say that, well, what does that really mean? And I think it means that you stay with the person. And how is it that you do that? And how do you know you're not doing it? How do you know that that's not happening for you? And ways of being gentle. So when I teach 350, we think about the word modulate as gentle, and so that is our tag word in 350. We are always gentle, and less is better because we just think that might be safe. And what are the strategies that we might have for doing that? This is also the course in which we sometimes introduce, I think we always introduce other practices that may support healing. So you may speak with your students and your community about things like color, about visualization, about imagery, metaphors, all sorts of other ways, music. There's all other kinds of integrative approaches that may be adjunctive to the work that you're doing, and I think we introduced that in this course, and certainly many of them come and have already kind of tried some of them. That's great, and then you can explore together and how that's working. How's that working for you? And make some new discoveries. And certainly, I know that we all probably go away learning a whole lot. How might that work together and do that? I think we also are very, and I think that's another thing that Dee has spoken about, and Dee and Dora together in their work about knowing when we're done. And that probably is a question that comes up a lot, but how is it that you know that you're done? And so Camille, who is from Pumpkin Hollow, she says that the sign of an advanced therapeutic touch therapist is a person who knows when they're done and they don't overdo it. And so we have this awareness of when we're done, and it doesn't mean, and we never fix everything, so we never fix anything actually. So, but just being able to do that to really help the person kind of feel solid in their space, and leaving the field gently. So one of the opportunities that we invite our groups to do is to work with people who have some pretty serious health challenges, And what we have been taught by the individuals over the years is the importance of really gently moving away, very gently, very intentionally, very lovingly moving away, and letting go of that, and then certainly allowing for that rest and integration, and inviting people to do some homework, or something that may help them remember that they are the captain of the ship. We are just really their helpers. So we have those kinds of things that we really speak more in depth about with probably the folks in our transpersonal community than maybe in the foundations. We also engage in reflective practice, and so Denise will be speaking with you again about inquiry. But remember that yesterday she invited us to just describe a treatment. So you start and you just describe it. What happened? I felt hot, I sent cool or something, whatever. Just describe it. Very raw, very just let it out, let it flow. And then as we get into the transpersonal course, we are beginning to really think about what the heck does that, what do I understand about that? What does that really mean? What am I seeing? What am I learning about myself that I keep seeing come up over and over again? Because it does happen, because we do see that and we do begin to notice that. And then I think that she will add this afternoon some work that we can do around really kind of inquiring about that. But reflective practice is a way of kind of exploring the meaning for both myself and for the healing partner. And journaling, we've spoken a lot about journaling. So Denise will be offering us a way of journaling through all 3 courses. I think in your compendium of resources, there's also other journals. We have one that we use that Jennifer and Marjorie and David and I are actually working with, also Amy, in our mentorship group, and we're kind of recreating this journal with questions that may just invite our community to just kind of ponder. I know Sherry Ann presented a workshop, I think in Boston and at Pumpkin Hollow, on journaling, where we had to write with our left hand, and there's lots of ways to journal. And so I encourage you to let it be what the learners want it to be. People might want to draw, they might want to. I had a student one time, and through the entire therapeutic touch, the entire course, she journaled. Her journal were pictures, and they were all pictures of a horse farm. So every week she would describe her experiences with these pictures of horses and fields, and it was phenomenal. And she could tell me what that meant. She wasn't into writing. She just was not into it. And but she was a beautiful artist, and she could really express herself. And what I noticed about her horses was that in the beginning they were kind of tiny, and their faces weren't like looking. They weren't like looking at me. And as she went through this, her horses' faces began to kind of look out. It was pretty cool when I really thought about that. So there's all sorts of ways, but journaling is very, very powerful. And I think, as Kathy Wilmering said yesterday, when we think about self-inquiry in our group, she reminded us that it is a way of kind of getting to know the architecture of ourself. And then documenting the TT session, which so in where I work as a staff nurse, we have therapeutic touch in a drop-down box, and which is kind of an interesting thing. But there's no place to really document what happened in the session. There really isn't, because we have only a number of characters that we're allowed to, 50 characters, including spaces. So there's really no place to write it down unless you add a quick note. And it's often in the documentation that you find things. So remember how when we first all learned therapeutic touch, and Dee told us to document and go back and make spaces and underline and stuff like that. And probably a lot of you did that. I was not necessarily one of the people who were as good about that as I might have been. But you really do discover a lot. And certainly if you have an ongoing practice, helping our transpersonal folks understand the importance of communication so that we know what each other's doing. And then recalling what has actually happened, just kind of pondering the whole experience, really just being with it, just what showed up, what showed up, what kind of insights, what have you learned about yourself that you might be able to apply to future practice without, I did a really bad job, or, but just what did you notice? What did you notice that can, you can move forward? So this is the beautiful labyrinth at Indralaya. And we just are kind of moving more and more and more deeply toward Denise when we do this. and the next in her work. And so the successive phases are the next critical element, and we've looked at those, and there they are listed, and they're certainly listed on your guidelines. So I just list them again. And we will kind of explore those a little bit and how we notice those things in our small groups. Isn't that beautiful? Oh my God, I just want to hold that baby. And there's nothing on this page because I think we look at our community, so we're sensitive to the community that we have, right? And so how are you going to integrate this? How are you going to integrate this knowing, this learning? How are you going to integrate this into your practice, whatever your practice might be? However you define your practice. I've thought a lot about that word practice. And how do you integrate that? So this is just something to remind us. And again, we have there's things on there. A lot of that hasn't really changed at all. But there's some guides on your guidelines about integrating this into practice. And certainly TTIA has done a stellar job over the years of helping us. How do you do this? And how do you take this therapeutic touch into a school? How do you take it into a healthcare institution? How might you do that? I think it might go even just a touch beyond this. How do you integrate this into your Lifeway? How do you do this into your own Lifeway? I don't know. It's certainly something worth exploring. And so this is the Karen. So this is the Karen that my group at the Dialogues created in a most powerful experience. And so I offer this to you because one of the things that I will say in the last guideline is the current state of TT research. And so sometimes we have to continue to move the stones from our Karen to gather the evidence, to be able to move our practices into the spaces where we want them to be recognized. And all of us who sit in this community understand. We understand the power, we understand the beauty, we understand therapeutic touch. We get it. Some people in the world don't get it in the same way we get it. But what they do get is evidence. And evidence opens the doors. And so for all of us who want to be able to share this in institutions, we have to have evidence. And so I just offer, and there's a lot of really good things, and there's a couple people in the room who have kind of just recently done some research, and so I cannot wait to see it published. Because the other thing I've learned about evidence is that it has to be published before people will pay attention to it. I don't think that's crazy, but that is, anyway, that's what I've noticed. And so in your packet, you'll also find just a thing that I did not create, but I was allowed to share with you from a source about the different, let me say that differently, comparison of quality, evidence-based practice, and research. So that just gives you some ideas. Jennifer did a beautiful evidence-based project on therapeutic touch at Ohio State not too terribly long ago, and was able to present that at the AANA. That's powerful. It's powerful evidence for us to take forward. Huh? It's on the jump drive. Yeah, it's on the stick. So anyway, I just want to say that, but it's kind of unpacking, and all of you are doing like really great things. So you're all contributing to this body of knowledge, and when we are willing to do this and get this out there, then what we are really doing is creating a way for this to be available more readily to folks. And so just as we are moving along, I just offered a few thoughts of reflection. So these are things that I actually thought about and kind of was pondering before I really did the PowerPoint. But the way that we see ourselves, really the way that we really envision ourselves, this sense of who we are. And isn't that really what we're doing at the in the transpersonal course? Isn't that really what we are really inviting folks to do? Really kind of become more and more solid in the sense of who we are. Help us really appreciate how brave and courageous we really are. And it does take a lot of courage, I think, to do this. And it kind of helps us grow. We remember that we each have choices that we make. We can change the world, and it's one step at a time, and we do it together. It's not it's not everything that's going to be fabulous, but we do little ways, and we make choices, don't we? We make choices how we show up on our mat. It's my choice. So I can be there and I can be present, or I can be a grumble bunny. It's my choice. And it's sometimes okay to be a grumble bunny, but maybe to not push that off on someone else. I think remembering who we are helps us really be patient. To kind of gives us that that opportunity to stay the course, to kind of stand in our space, not as know-it-alls, but really stand with humility in our space, and kind of stay the course and persevere when things kind of get hard. And even in our groups, even in our courses, you know, sometimes there's silence, and so Marjorie is a master at this, and she really is. She is so patient. So someone will say something, and she'll say, "What would that mean to you?" And there could be a lot of moments where there's nothing said, and we just have to kind of be really patient around this. So patience is something that we maybe not you, but it's something that I allow myself to practice. Our whole life is about learning and discovery, and so I think about, I think about the wee ones who could like look at a caterpillar for 20 minutes, right? And they would just love that. And sometimes we would just be thinking, I wonder if that caterpillar would move off my path so I could walk by. And just so those new eyes, that discovery, it's just like so beautiful. And that's what we want to be able to bring to our transpersonal. We want to bring it to all our communities, but in this time we're thinking about our transpersonal communities. And this wisdom that we have kind of helps us really go throughout our life, and our life really is about an education of our heart and our soul. So these are just thoughts that I would share with you, and I would help us and kind of invite us to remember that it all begins with the first step. So as we have people coming to us in the transpersonal course, some folks are really taking these steps, these early steps in what will be, if it's like probably all of you who sit in this room, a huge change in our life, a huge, huge, huge change in our life. And so it is the dawn of the solstice, and the transpersonal, all these guidelines are, there are some revisions, but they're built on a solid foundation. They're built on a solid foundation, and they're built on your voices, all of your voices, and the voices of those of you that are not here, but they come from your practice. They come from all your ways of knowing. So your knowing of science, your knowing of your own intuition, your personal knowing, your aesthetic, all of that knowing goes into these. And as we look at some of the revisions and we kind of think, well, there's kind of this deepening that's going on, it is kind of the solstice of our time. And we remember that things for me are not always clear. I get glimpses, I get little tiny glimpses of things, but I don't always have clarity over it. Sometimes I have a little bit of clarity. But this whole uncertainty piece, isn't it? I really do need to be comfortable with uncertainty, or I need to at least think, I need to be at least pondering that. And so there is a bit of uncertainty as we move forward, but there's a lot of support. There's a lot of support, and there is that knowing, that deep knowing that things happen for a reason. There is trust, and we have to be. We are strong. And so this is a picture that I took at Indralaya a long time ago, and so I'm always reminded of equanimity and compassion, a strong back and a soft heart. And isn't that what each of you as facilitators, each of you as teachers, each of you as people offer to our world? And this drops the ego. It is not about that. It is just really being willing to kind of stand and stay the course. And at the end of the day, life is a blessing. Isn't that a great thing? I did not make that up. I didn't. It is a great slide. It is. I cannot take credit for it. However, it's in my thing. So life is a blessing. So the blessing that we are offered as facilitators of the transpersonal course is the blessing of walking with another as their journey deepens, and as their journey deepens, so does ours. And as ours deepens, so does others. And so what a gift, what a gift. And so I would just say, there you are. So those are just a few of the guideline revisions that I would offer to you.